Values of prefixes and family relation terms. When we enter the table enlaces, we're going to be able to find all the values of prefixes and family element terms. But of course, we want to be able to filter so we can find only the values, for example, of a certain prefix in relation to a certain process. So here we're going to see we have different columns. Some of them are quite important. Here we have the ID column that gives us a unique ID number for each option in the prefix field or the family element field. And here we have a column, it's called ID tipo enlace. And this is going to allow me to filter. This way I can display only the value related to a prefix within a certain process. So in order to do this, first I'm going to go to AP Campos Tabla. I'm going to find the unique identifier between the process panel and the prefix. And once I have it, I'm going to use it to filter the data that I have here in this list. So once I have this ID, I'm going to filter in the column ID tipo enlace, and the grid is going to display a row per each process or family record in which the field has a value. So here I have another example. Well, in this column, we have all the different values that have been selected in the prefix. So here I have an example where I filtered by 581, and this would be this unique identifier that allows me to filter the data so not all the values of this prefix are displayed in the list. I only want the values with a certain class of process. So in order to do that, I go to Campos Tabla, I find this ID, and once I have it, I use it to filter here, to filter the data. So here we're going to see an example. First, I go to Campos Tabla. In this table, I know I have the information of the panel of my class of process related with a certain prefix. For example, this one that's called employee responsible. So once I have this ID, I can go to AP Enlaces and I can filter. Once I filter, I can see all the values that have been selected in this prefix that's called employee responsible, but only the ones of this class of process, okay? The class of process with the ID 5. Now, if I want to filter and find only the value of a unique process, then here I could also filter by the ID of the process. In order to find the information of the processes, we can always go to the table Procesos, search the ID, and use it to filter this information. I just entered the SQL database and I'm going to this table that's called Campos Tabla. And the first thing I want to do is find the relation between my process and the prefix field. In order to do that, I'm going to filter. Here I have several processes. I have one of them that has the ID 28. So I'm going to use this value to filter. So I'll come here. I'll filter by this column here. It's called Nombre Tabla. So I filtered where the panel has to be the panel 28, since I know this is the ID of my class of process. And now I'm displaying only the fields that are in the panel of this class of process. We can see it here. If I enter the platform, I could also go to the panel and I'd see all these fields here match the fields that I showed in my database. Now we're going to focus on one of these fields. It's a prefix field. For example, let's choose this one here. The editor, it's a prefix of the family employees. Okay, so first I want to identify it here. We have it here. And we can see its unique ID is 2720. So I'm going to find the table enlaces. Now, once I found it, I'm going to display its values. And here, I'm going to use the ID to filter. So I'm going to say where. I'm going to select the column ID tipo enlace is equal to, and here we're going to input this ID 2720. So here we can see the value selected is Anahil. We can also see two processes of this class of process were launched because we have the value ide elemento origen that's different in each row and identifies the value. Well, it identifies that we actually have two different processes with the same value.